Hello, this is Mr. Aguilar. We will be doing our 5Ws Part 1 lecture of the French Revolution. So here's your task and purpose. You're going to gain a basic understanding of the French Revolution through note-taking on the 5Ws, so you should have the 5Ws note sheet in front of you. That's who, what, when, where, why of this time period. In order to have the necessary prerequisite knowledge to make evaluations on revolutions as a whole. Yeah, so we're going to learn about the French Revolution, which is the most famous revolution in history. Why did it happen? How did it happen? What was the end result? Because we're going to try to see how we can apply this knowledge from the past to the revolutions of today and see if we can make predictions on the revolutions of today, if they can be successful or not successful. If we want to create a revolution ourselves, how we can make them successful. No revolution is better to look at than the archetypical revolution in history, the French Revolution. So yeah, I'm not here, obviously, but you guys are going to do this in the intro section or the opening note section. You're first going to do like your beginning knowledge of France and the French Revolution. So I have a little video activity for you. So first you're going to just talk to each other, and then you're going to write down on your paper the answer to question 1 right here. What do you already know about France or the French people or French history in general? There's a lot of stereotypes associated with France. France is a very famous nation in history, so maybe you know a lot, maybe you know a little. Just give me your initial knowledge. So probably pause the video right here to do that. Okay, I hope you did that. Now you're going to be watching the video to the left right here. It is the French national anthem, which was created during the French Revolution. While watching the video / after watching the video, you're going to write down answers to these 2 questions. What's one line or lyric that surprised or shocked you from the video, and why? And what did you learn about France from this video, from their national anthem? So take some time to think and talk about that after you watch the video. Watch the video now, then do your thing, and then move on. Okay, hopefully you watched the video. Hopefully you answered the questions. Cool, now you can move on. Good job. Oops. Okay, so now is the time to take our notes on the 5 W's of the French Revolution. First W we're going to start off with is what? What was the French Revolution? Also, I hope you enjoyed that video activity. I thought that was pretty cool. But what was the French Revolution? The French Revolution is, well, let's start with the word revolution. A revolution defined as a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. A lot of you are probably asking, like, because this is your first time taking notes without me, I'm not even here. What do I write down? There's so much stuff. Well, what is relevant? I know that's like very hard for you to determine right now, but you can assume the things that are very relevant are the things that I write down, as I have limited words on this screen. And in addition, the things I repeat a lot. A lot of times I'm going to be utilizing my graphics. So, in summary, what things do you write down for your notes? Well, definitely the words I write down. And then secondly, phrases or concepts that I associate or I give importance to. Either that's going to be through repetition or me saying this is very important or this is essential or something of that nature. Okay, you're definitely going to want to have these words down. A revolution is a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. So this is when there's some sort of pre-existing order or system in place, and then through force, maybe violence or maybe through other means, but a lot of times through violence, this old system is replaced with some sort of new system. Yes, a lot of times people see it as governments, but you've probably heard of like the tech revolution, the social media revolution. These all still count as revolutions because there's an old way people used to do things, aka not tech, not social media, and then forcibly over time, these old ways were replaced with new ways. Now, in the context of governments and nations, and specifically the French Revolution, the old regime in charge of France was something known as l'Ancien Régime. L'Ancien Régime was just basically a monarchy, so like a king and the king's family. And this family was named the Bourbon. That was like their last name, the Bourbon dynasty, right? And the Bourbon dynasty, headed by Louis XVI at this time period, was in charge of France. And due to certain things that are going to happen, which we'll get into in the later slides, people aren't going to want him to be in charge anymore. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, So basically, l'Ancien Regime and Louis XVI are going to be replaced with something wholly new, which is something we'll learn about through the unit. Hopefully you have these words down. But now I'm going to tell you the other thing you should write down. The other thing of importance in this slide is to know that revolutions tend to, not always, but they tend to, go through 4 periods. They start moderate and they end with a restoration period if you're cynical, which I'll get into. So this is a theory of a historian named Crane Brinton from a book that he wrote called The Anatomy of a Revolution. And he looked at revolutions throughout history. And he said all revolutions, or the vast majority of revolutions, tend to go through these 4 periods. First period, which you don't got to write down all this stuff, just write down like what the period is and kind of what characterizes this period. I'll kind of go slow for you, just so you understand it. But Crane Brinton says that revolutions go through 4 periods. When revolutions start, they start with a moderate period. So write down 1 moderate equals moderate period in your what column of your notes. So 1 equals moderate period. He said revolutions in the moderate period, at the beginning of the revolution, they tend to be pretty like limited with change. Nothing crazy is going on. People are trying to change their society, change the system under which they live in through more moderate means. Not radical, but like moderate, like slow. Not going to do anything crazy. Try to change things without like doing anything crazy or hurting anyone or anything of that nature. Things start off moderate. Revolutions start off moderate. So you should have 1 equals moderate, and then just know that moderate periods are characterized by slow, not like radical change, not violent change. Okay? The second period of a revolution following the moderate period is something known as the radical period. Crane Brinton noticed that like when people are tired of change not happening fast enough, radical people, so people who are the opposite of moderate and slow, like people who are a little bit extreme in their belief systems, will take charge of the revolution, and they'll try to make change happen fast, now, be violent about it, and yeah, they'll be very aggressive about it because they're tired of very little change happening at the beginning of the revolution. A lot of times there'll be a lot of terror. A lot of times there'll be like crazy ideas popping out. Like, for example, the French Revolution, just so you know, people are like trying to change things from a kind of system of government ruled by kings and queens to more like U.S. style of government, like using like a democracy, that kind of thing, or technically a republic, right? What's it called? Representative form of government is kind of what the French Revolution was about early on. But in the radical period, people are like, let's not just change the government and like kings and queens. Let's actually change like everything. Religion, that's dumb. Get rid of it. Pounds, that's a stupid measurement. What about kilograms? Miles, dumb. Change it to kilometers. The months, January and February, that's stupid. What about thermidor and fructidor? They start changing like crazy things. Walking on the left side of the street, stupid. Let's walk to the right side of the street, on the right side of the street. So radical periods tend to have like weird ideas that aren't even related to the original idea. You'll get to learn more about this later. So know that radical period, or 2 equals radical period, so that's the second period of a revolution. This is where crazy change tends to happen very quickly. There tends to be like a lot of terror and chaos in the radical period. Third periods of revolutions are known as the Thermidorian, or if you have trouble spelling that, or that doesn't mean anything to you, you can just call it the cooling period. This is the period, third period, so it's after the radical period, where people kind of chill out. They're like, let's not be scared and like do aggressive, violent things anymore. Let's just kind of like relax. Let's try to like, you know, go a little bit back to the moderate period where we're changing things slowly. No need to like get rid of religion or say that the pound is stupid or miles are dumb. Like, let's just kind of chill out a bit and go back to the way things were going when we were trying to slowly change things, that sort of nature. So the cooling period, or the Thermidorian period, is the third period of a revolution, and they are characterized by slow change in reaction to the crazy change of the radical period. A lot of times the cooling period is also ineffective. A lot of times they're effective at calming people from the chaos of the radical period, but very little change happens during the Thermidorian period. Finally is the Restoration period. Cynical historians, like Crane himself, say kind of like, yeah, revolutions try to change things, but in reality, the world doesn't really change that much, and really it's just kind of like a continuation of how things used to be before the revolution. It just looks a little bit different. So, for example, in the French Revolution, spoiler alert, they do get rid of Louis XVI, who was the leader of France at the time, but then a guy named Napoleon Bonaparte becomes in charge of the country during the Restoration period. And yeah, he's not a king, but he makes himself an emperor. So when you think about how much had actually changed, you'll see how much actually changed. But like from an outsider's like baseline perspective, which you're at this moment, because you don't really know too much about the French Revolution yet, you're like, wait, so they started off with a king, and they had this whole revolution to change their lives, and then they just have an emperor at the end? What the heck? That's why people say like a lot of times revolutions don't really change much. It just looks different. Instead of a king, they have an emperor. That sort of thing. Okay, moving on. I will end this part with just the when, because it's pretty simple, and then I'm going to have a part 2. So when was the French Revolution? French Revolution, basically put in your when notes, you're going to want to have the things that I have written down, right? So you're going to definitely want the dates. 1789 to 1799. So it's about a 10-year period, depending on something I'm going to get into. But you're going to want to have 1789 to 1799 for the dates of when the French Revolution occurred. But again, because you're all budding historians and dates don't really mean much to you probably yet, it's better to have events as opposed to dates because they actually mean something. So the French Revolution starts with something known as the Calling of the Estates General. The Calling of the Estates General is essentially the king, Louis XVI, in the year 1789. His country had a lot of problems, which we'll get into in part 2 for various reasons. So he calls his whole country together, representatives from different parts of his country, which we'll learn about in the Who. He gets them all in a big room, and he's like, all right, guys, let's try to fix the problems that France has gotten themselves into. But you'll see him asking for help is kind of the beginning of the end for I don't know if I want to call him poor, but for the king of France at the time in 1789, Louis XVI. That's what's going to start the French Revolution. Now, what ends the French Revolution is the consulship of Napoleon. That basically just means when Napoleon, this guy, becomes in charge of France. He does a lot of things, which we'll get into later, but he kind of wiggles his way into becoming leader of France. Not emperor yet, but just like leader or first consul of France. Now, other things you should kind of have written down is you should have an understanding of what the Estates General is, because I told you what that is. Estates General, again, is when Louis XVI called all the people in France together to try to fix the problems. And then you should know that Napoleon becoming consul, according to a lot of historians, was the end of the French Revolution. However, this is heavily disputed. And this is what we're going to kind of debate as your final. Your final is going to be an argumentative essay for this unit. And the question is, essentially, is Napoleon like a hero to the revolution? Did he try to like actually change France and the world for the better on the basis of the goals of the French Revolution, which we'll get into later, the goals of the French Revolution? Or did he end the revolution like many older Orthodox historians believe? So we're going to kind of do our studies. We're going to learn how revolutions work. We're going to see Napoleon's place in revolutions. And then you're going to make your final decision in an argumentative essay. Yep. Okay. So that's probably enough for part 1. And then you're going to watch part 2 right after this. We're going to start with Who for part 2.